Moment in this hour. We're now joined by Tim Sullivan, columnist, Louisville Courier-Journal, SicEm 365 Radio and 365 Sports. And he wrote an article, Why Louisville, ACC, looking for ESPN to return to the bargaining table. And Tim, thanks for your time with Craig and David. We had a writer who covers North Carolina with us, I think it was earlier in the week, about Guskowitz and what he had said. And then I saw your article. I said, oh, that's number two. Do you feel that's kind of starting to have some leaders in the ACC speak out a little bit about what they want?
Yeah, I was really struck by the comments from the North Carolina chancellor, whose name I won't even attempt to pronounce. But, I think he stated what's pretty clear, that, the ACC is in a tough spot with its TV contract that runs through 2036, and if the league is to stabilize, it really needs to revisit it. And I don't know what ESPN's incentive to do that would be necessarily, but I think they do have an interest in having strong properties and beyond the super conferences, the two Big Ten and the SEC. And I guess at this point, the ACC may be next in line, and it's a big drop from Southeast Conference and the Big Ten to anybody else in the Power Five.
Tim, what kind of way would you describe the shockwave that was felt? Certainly last year around this time, Big 12 Media Days just wrapped up, and a few days later, Oklahoma and Texas, it's announced that they're going to be heading to the SEC. So now USC and UCLA almost a year later doing the same thing. Did the ACC maybe feel this one a bit more because of the implications that are now coming out of the LA schools going to the Big Ten?
Well, yeah, I think to some extent, I think it shows that the Big Two are still in acquisition mode, and if the Big Ten is going to add members from the West Coast, then I think that certainly changes the overall dynamic that everyone is in play at this point. If they can get out of their grant of rights agreement, and there's already been speculation of Clemson and North Carolina, Florida State, and Virginia talking to the SEC. That story has neither been confirmed nor effectively debunked, as far as I'm concerned. But there's still a huge problem for anybody trying to get out of the ACC, because not only do you have an exit fee in excess of $100 million, you would effectively cede your television rights through 2036, which that could run into hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, and I'm not sure that anybody is equipped to do that. But I would not be surprised if there are people lawyers trying to figure out if there's a way to get around it. If the conference were to dissolve, if you could get eight members to vote to get out, that provision would disappear. So I think there's a lot of discussion, most of it, or nearly all of it, behind the scenes. But I'm sure that there are probably talks with the Pac-12 or the Pac-10, whatever the number is today, and the Big 12 would be in there as well. I mean, I think they've been pretty public about that they're open for business, and I can certainly understand why.
Well, I know the alliance actually worked because it delayed the college football championship as far as that's concerned, any kind of growth there. But is that now kind of a four-letter word when anyone mentions alliance?
Well, I think that we've seen alliances like this before, and the one that comes to mind was the Nazi-Soviet non-aggression pact, which Hitler betrayed by invading Russia. But I don't know how some of these college administrators look each other in the face, knowing the kind of business that they've done, and how much it's undermined supposed colleagues and alliance members. But this is a new era. It's not entirely new. I mean, we've seen conferences rated for a couple of decades now, and this just seems to be ratcheting up. I don't know how many more schools there are that would move the needle that the Big Ten and the SEC don't already have, but I think that the game now is how many television markets you can bring and what kind of financial impact that has. And I've been looking at the Nielsen rankings, and I guess the markets that are most intriguing from that standpoint are probably Dallas, Fort Worth, and San Francisco. You can see TCU and SMU and Stanford and Cal all in play if that's what it's about. But I don't know that any of them have the cachet that USC and UCLA or Oklahoma and Texas have.
You mentioned it, Tim, and by the way, I love that World War II analogy. That's spot on. I absolutely love that. But you mentioned, the possibilities about just all the talk that's going on. And I know one of the quotes in your article is from Kenny Payne, Louisville men's basketball coach. How much do you think that is driving coaches and administrators crazy who aren't at the steering wheel, just of what all the speculation does potentially and how that can be used harmfully or against them in some ways?
Well, I mean, if you're in the position of a coach in a ACC, a Pac-12, or a Big 12 school, you know that there is a tremendous financial gap between you and the other two Power 5 conferences. And, if they have those resources and presumably an equivalent gap in NIL opportunities, you're up against it. And there have been certainly success stories at programs that didn't have those resources, and Baylor being a prominent one. Mm-hmm. But long term, is that sustainable? And I think that if you're a coach and you have an opportunity to get into one of those leagues that is going to pay $50 million or more in annual conference distributions per team, you're going to probably gravitate in that direction, no matter what your history or your loyalties might be, because at the end of the day, the rich are getting a lot richer, and the rest of college football and the other sports that depend on it are going to be at a sizable disadvantage.
I thought that the quote or whatever the spokesman said, Dr. Lori Gonzalez, the interim president at Louisville, she thinks there are too many unknowns at this time to speculate on the future of the ACC. And I think a lot of conferences could probably just say that and just fill in the blank of whatever conference we're talking about.
Yeah, I think you're right. And, I think there's even uncertainty really with the Big Ten and the SEC, and that, are they going to add more teams? And if so, who? I mean, there's one of the stories that I saw was that, Kentucky doesn't want Louisville in the SEC, and Tennessee may have objections to certain schools, and it's an interesting mating dance. And I don't know that any individual school has veto power, but I'm sure they vote in blocks based on common interest. And if you're a coach at I'm trying to think of a good example, but say you're at Florida, do you want Florida State in your league, or Miami, which is such a rich recruiting area? If you're we saw what happened when Texas joined or began the process of joining the SEC, and how that played at Texas A&M. I mean, it's everyone has their own individual interest, and there are going to be some things that fit more easily than others. And I can imagine there's going to be a lot of pressure being applied, and a lot of maybe reluctant partnerships being formed.
What do you think of and I haven't seen so much of this as lately, but we've all been talking about these alliances and partnerships and everything. What do you think the ACC could benefit from with the Pac-12 alliance, as was kind of floating out there a few days ago?
I think to some extent it's kind of a mutual preservation approach. I mean, the story, and I think this may have been SI.com had this, that there was talk of a television partnership between the two leagues, not a merger, but the ACC has a better position with ESPN and with its ACC network than the Pac-12 has, and if they can join together, mutual interest, there could be some benefit to that, and I think. Theoretically, the same could be said for the Big 12. I don't know that that there's a great geographic fit among those three. I mean, the idea that Miami could be playing at Washington is a tremendous burden on college athletes. But I think that for the present, you're going to see people look to deals that can solidify where they stand, or raid schools that can give them more security. And I would not be surprised, frankly, if we see significant movement going forward. Although, again, I don't know that there's other than maybe Clemson and North Carolina, to a lesser extent, Washington and Oregon. I don't know how many schools are left that could make a material difference in a conference's financial picture, because of either their stadium capacity isn't big enough, or their attendance isn't, or their television market isn't significant. There's so many factors that come into play, and it appears to me that the real choice schools have been plucked.
And as you said in your article, and I think we've said on this show a few times, like that would be just the networks going, you know what, we're going to do something nice. We're going to forget about all the money grubbing for a second. We're just going to keep college football afloat by, helping people out. And it's just kind of hard to imagine that, with ESPN at the strings and whatnot. But, Louisville's no stranger to realignment. I mean, the school's been through this before, and getting into the ACC and that whole process years ago. If all hell were to break loose scenario and everybody's up for grabs, so to speak, and the ACC having that long-term contract, there is, I guess, got to be some feeling of, hey, we are under a long-term deal. But let's just say, like, doomsday scenario, Tim, how does Louisville feel as a university? How do they feel like they're positioned in the grand scheme of things? Is there anything glaringly lacking, or are they just pretty good across the board? How do you view that?
Well, I think from a competitive standpoint, they're in fairly decent shape, particularly with non-revenue sports. And their football program has had terrific success in recruiting this past year, and I think they've really done well with NIL, and so that is kind of on the upswing. The basketball program is shrouded by this NCAA investigation that dates to 2017. They've had their hearing with the IARP, and I would expect that there will be a decision there probably sometime, maybe September or early October, and maybe they can finally put this behind them, although we would expect additional sanctions and possibly a postseason ban. But, at one point, the Louisville basketball program was the most profitable in the country for years and years. They've fallen off of that since, Rick Pitino was fired, but, they're still a state-of-the-art arena, a big market in terms of, a college town, at least, with no professional sports other than soccer, and it's a second-tier men's team and a kind of a fledgling women's team that really doesn't compete with them the way say the Bengals and the Reds compete with the University of Cincinnati, or that the Dallas Cowboys compete with everybody in your state. But I think that it's an interesting dilemma, because this is a program that has a fairly passionate following within the city of Cincinnati, the city of Louisville. I'm sorry, but outside of the county, this is big blue territory. This is the University of Kentucky fans, statewide, and I don't know that the Louisville market is such that it would be of tremendous appeal to conferences that were, starting from scratch. But given that most of the prime schools are already in one of the two ultimate power leagues, I guess we can call them. I think that there's going to be a scramble for those programs that have some success, that have a large television market, et cetera. And I would think that many of the ACC teams are in the same boat that they are. Maybe not in North Carolina and Clemson, but pretty much everybody else.
Hey, Tim, thanks for your time. We appreciate it. Tim Sullivan, Louisville Courier-Journal. The article, again, why Louisville ACC looking for ESPN to return to the bargaining table. A friend of mine that I've been able to kind of have